It's late when I hear Edward returning from the East Wing. He enters the room, sweating, and closes the door with a soft click. When he stands in front of me, I look down to see his is trembling. I look up at him in shock. "Mr. Rochester," I say, breathlessly. Hi, I'm Bim.
And I'm Nichole, and welcome to the Library of Thirst here at Thirst Aid Kit.
Nichole, today we're doing something very special and very close to my heart. Yeah, today we're going to talk about literary baes.
I love it already.
Thank you. We're talking about all the people that we have fallen in love with over the years, having first read about these characters. So we're talking books, we're talking short fiction, long form fiction, we're talking graphic novels, comic books, we're talking basically everything that's been adapted for screen, things that even haven't been adapted yet. Every book you've ever read. I feel very strongly that I can't really enjoy a piece of fiction unless I am falling in love with at least 7 characters.
I mean, if you don't fall in love with a book, period, it's not worth your time.
Are you even reading?
Right.
Right. So there were ample opportunities for me to fall in love and to crush fiercely on so many characters. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. All your favorites from literature. All our favorites anyway. So I'm way excited.
We have got Mallory Ortberg in the house. I love them so much. They're the co-founder of The Toast.
Yes.
Number one. They're currently Dear Prudence at Slate.
Listen, credentials up the wazoo. I love it.
Hilarious debut book called Text from Jane Eyre.
Read it, loved it.
And they have another book coming out March 2018 called The Merry Spinster, which is a short story collection.
Oh, we'll read it. We'll love it.
I can't wait to hear what they have to say about literary baes, crushes that we have from all kinds of works of literature.
I'm ready.
Let's get into it. All right, Mallory, when we told you about today's theme and asked you who you wanted to talk about, you sent us a list that was basically a taxonomy of your literary crushes organized by category. Can you tell us a little bit more about that list?
I would love to tell you a little bit more about that list. I spent probably 25 minutes making sure that I had all the categories right. I've got withholding jerks who are obsessed with you, capitalist exception fantasies, simultaneously devoted yet unavailable lesbians of all genders, and wry best friends that everyone else has overlooked but not you. At first glance, I was trying to think of who are my crushes, because in some ways I have a crush on almost any character I've ever read. And so I was trying to think of who are the fictional people I have logged the most man hours having imaginary conversations with in my head. And so that started to turn into different subcategories of sometimes you want somebody who's going to fix capitalism, but just for you. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, the system is so broken and I'm so overwhelmed at the prospect of trying to make the world different. Maybe today I'm just going to settle for someone incredibly rich who loves me. That's going to be as far as it goes, which is so weird, right? Because none of these people are real. They are not suffering from a lack of my attention, but that's part of it. In a way, they are all unavailable in as much as none of them are real people, even a little bit, and have never spent any time thinking about me, which is very frustrating. And that's why reading is a bad idea. And you shouldn't do it because you spend all this time thinking about these people and they never spend any time thinking about you.
Oh my
and it's
gosh.
like having 1,000 boyfriends and girlfriends who never remember your birthday. And you spend every waking moment thinking, how can I make them happy? How can I get them to love me? And the answer is you can't. They're not real. Someone made them up and then they died and you're alive.
Wow.
I really feel like you have put a magnifying glass over my heart and read my entire love life.
Wow. I'm going to go cry for a solid 20 minutes.
Oh, guys. I mean, thank you, but also I'm really sorry. I didn't want to do that to you, but it happened and I'm going to do the same.
All right, Mallory, why do you think literary crushes, these characters from these books that we've grown up with, why do we keep falling in love with them, or at least how do they imprint on us? What is it about them?
So I think especially for me, one of the things that feels so powerful about a literary crush is you can kind of picture someone however you want to, right? Like There's sometimes a lot of description of what somebody looks like. And sometimes, especially if you're reading like older literature, stuff that you don't necessarily understand, they'll be like, oh, she had a noble forehead. And then they just move on. And you're like, what does that person look like?
A noble
So you can just
forehead.
like imagine whatever you want. And so often in books, unless it's like specifically a romance novel, you're not necessarily going to get a scene where someone's desire is like consummated and they like have it all out. So there's just like, you can read like 300 pages of just restrained, quiet longing. And you can sort of spend the rest of your life just thinking about that. Like, oh, picturing someone different, imagining a variety of scenes in which that like longing is finally, expressed or put out in the open. And you can just like quietly die from having too many feelings alone, like in a tree somewhere. And I at least really I vibe on that level. That is where I am most comfortable. Is just like quietly longing for something and not talking about it. So for me, that's the thing about literary characters that's really like, oh, I'm dying over here.
Yeah, I love that too. I saw a great tweet that I had to retweet on back in November, and essentially it was a person on Twitter whose username is HugVVArt, and this is just to me like my brand and arguably yours as well, Mallory. And they wrote, "Sex is cool and all, but have you ever tried reading an angsty romance and getting to the part where they finally kiss after like 30 chapters?" And I was like, God, yes. I die every time.
Yes, or like they finally like touch hands for a second, and you're like, oh, I'm a puddle on the floor.
That's it. It's always like a mild kind of like a finger touch or whatever, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so hard.
And then it's like I have to go home and quietly reorganize my entire emotional life based on this finger touch.
Exactly.
I like particularly these older books, like you've mentioned, Mallory. There'll be like 5 pages of a description of the house and their clothes and stuff, and it says so much. It's like, oh, here's this handsome man, but his cuffs are frayed. Ooh, what does that tell us? Things like that just really are really important to me, and they paint such a picture of the person and the things that they're going through, and that appeals to me as well.
Yeah, I also I was saying to Nichole, one of the things I read earliest in terms of like a series of books beyond my Enid Blyton years, R.I.P., were Mills and Boon novels, which I think are known in America as Harlequin.
Yes.
Did you read Mills and Boons and Harlequins also as well?
I'm familiar, yes.
Oh my God. Everything I learned about sex for maybe a solid 8 years came from Mills and Boon, with occasional kind of like, Jackie Collins and Jilly Cooper thrown in. Because I discovered Mills and Boons because I had older cousins who lived with us and they read Mills and Boons. And I remember reading my first Mills and Boon probably before I was even like I think I must have been a tween. So I must have been like maybe 11 or 12, so way too young. And I remember reading about certain kinds of like guys, they always had all these like tropes. The rich guy who you cruel mouth and full lips and moves like a jungle cat and all this shit. And I was just like, yes, let me just put this into my brain. I love romance novels, and I especially love Mills and Boons. So that was something that was so interesting to me. I know Nichole is also a massive romance novel fan.
Yes, huge. But I've since gone away from kind of like sweet, delicate, chaste stuff like Harlequin, romances. I tend to get more into paranormal and urban fantasy stuff, where people have powers, or they're werewolves, or some kind of shifter, or they're a fairy, or something like that. Those I like those because I like the idea of people just having. I like having supernatural powers.
Sure you do. In 2017, that feels very apt.
Yeah, and so I also just kind of like the idea that, these people get together and the sex is really intense. The sex is usually much more graphic in these types of novels.
It's hella more graphic in Mills and Boon too now, let me tell you that.
Really?
You just got to find the right imprint, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah.
I'll send you some links.
Yeah, please do.
Was there a particular childhood character that you loved so much and you kind of held on to as an ideal long after you had outgrown that reading group?
Oh my God. Yes, this feels so personal. This is great. I'm trying to think of like which of my secrets I'm willing to reveal.
Yes, please.
I think probably one of the earliest ones that I can remember is the first Mrs. De Winter from the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier.
Nice.
She's dead for the whole book. You never meet her.
Right.
The best kind
her
of
name
character.
is Rebecca. And she's just this she's everything that the sort of narrator isn't, right? Like she's larger than life. She's demanding. She can be cruel. She's a lot of fun at parties. She sleeps with both men and women. She kind of plays everyone against one another. And she sort of like lives on in this really stern, scary, like evil lesbian character, like coded as lesbian, obviously, Mrs. Danvers. And she's just like trying to manipulate everyone from beyond the grave. And I was just like, yes, manipulate me from beyond the grave, please.
Classic Becky.
Classic.
That reminds me of another book from our childhood that, I think we all have strong feelings about, that features a woman kind of tucked away someplace or not here, and that is Jane Eyre.
Jane motherfucking Eyre. So necessary to my growth as a human being.
There was a point where I literally read this book every summer until maybe just after college.
Yeah.
I love Mr. Rochester, and I love, the whole mad woman in the attic thing.
Yeah. It's amazing how much that's permeated the culture, by the way, this idea of the mad woman in the attic. How old were you when you first read it, Mallory?
I was probably in 5th grade, I think. Yeah. And like at very much at that age, too, where I was like, I don't understand most of this, but I love it. And I'm very confused.
Yeah. I think that's my first experience with Jane Eyre as well. Like I was probably 10 or 11, and I was like, oh my God, this book is so. I understood it as a complex thing that I didn't fully grasp, but I loved it anyway. Nichole, how old were you when you read it?
Yeah, about that. 10 or 11, something like that. So from that age until about 22, I was reading it.
Man. And Jane, like they're both such terrible people.
They are.
They're awful. One of the things that's so great and so intense about a story like that is it's always like in this kind of story, there's always a reason that the object of your intense focus and desire is rude and indifferent to you.
Right.
And the reason is because they are so overwhelmed by their desire for you that they might explode and die.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which often in real life is not the case.
It's never the
Often
case,
in
actually.
real life,
it's never been the case in my life.
Right. When someone that I'm sort of obsessed with is rude and indifferent towards me, it's because they don't really like being around me and they do not return my feelings.
Right.
Yes.
But you always loved, I think, the idea of, the reason they left this party really abruptly is because if they stood next to me for another second, they would fall to their knees and beg to kiss my mouth with their mouth. Obviously, that's why. So, this sort of idea that like, the reason this guy's a real jerk is because he can't control his overwhelming desire for me. That's clearly what's going on. Obviously, that's the case.
Yeah, it's Mallory Ortberg there with the inconvenient truth.
It's such a bummer. Everyone can always contain their feelings for me. It's a
all
real
the time.
disappointment.
People are entire bottles with lids. Everyone can hold on to their feelings. I'm always kind of like, that's not the. Oh, okay, great. I'll just go hide. I wanted to talk a little bit also about the book that kind of awakened you, or the character that really kind of made you think, this is what I like. Can you think of such a character, Mallory?
Oh, man. Probably there's two. And they're both, again, I feel like this is really weighted towards old school European literature. But probably number one is Edmund from The Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, yeah. Intense.
In part because I could not figure out, do I want to be this guy or have this guy be obsessed with me for the rest of my life? And I'm still figuring that out. And if anyone would like to explain it to me, I think you would save me a lot in therapy bills. So please write to me immediately and let me know which one it is. But that and Laurie from Little Women. Both of those, they're two kind of different tropes, right? Like one is your childhood best friend who understands you better than anyone else in the world. And like as they grow up with you, they start to see you in a new light. And the other one is, again, that like capitalist fantasy of you're not just obsessed with me, you're incredibly wealthy.
Yes.
And you hate everyone else in the world and you're dedicated to revenge. And the only thing that can sway you from your singleness of purpose is me.
Listen, to this day, since again, Count of Monte Cristo was something I read very young, or I don't even, I guess I was 12. I would say I was junior high school. I read it. And to this day, if I have to be over someone's house that I don't particularly like, but, social obligations or whatever, I won't eat anything to symbolize I don't fuck with you.
Oh, my God.
Wow. That's old school.
That is the best thing I've ever heard.
I love it. It's kind of like, when you look at this gesture, look at my gesture,
yes,
feel it, understand what I'm saying to you.
I will not eat the bread and salt at your table. We are not bound to one another by the rules of hospitality.
You're so dramatic, Nichole. I love it.
Yes, but Mallory, can you, because I have never read Little Women, can you explain a little bit more about Lori and
Yes.
why she touches you?
He.
Oh,
so
see,
this is actually great, though. This is what's wonderful. There was a kind of like a well-known plotline on Friends is that Joey reads the book Little Women for the first time and also gets confused.
Joke. I love that joke.
And that's kind of part of the fun, I think, especially if you grew up reading a lot of like quote unquote classic literature. There are not a lot of canonically like gay or queer couples. But both Joe and Lori have really androgynous names. Joe especially is like a character that like you sometimes hear referred to as a tomboy, talks a lot about, wishing she were a man. And so there's that you can totally read Joe and Lori as like two guys or two girls or two people with like gender fluid identities. And that's
great.
Kind of fantastic.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I think also that was something that the filmmakers were thinking about when they did the adaptation in 1994, which starred Winona Ryder as Joe and Christian Bale as Lori. And in this scene the clip we're about to play, if you have a look at them from behind, I mean, Joe is wearing a dress, sure, but the hair is of a similar length, and like Christian's hair is like falling round his face, and he looks androgynous in a way, and so does Joe. Like Winona has that great face, and the two of them really could be anything that you want them to be. And in this scene, they are essentially. He's come back and he's about to propose marriage, and it is delightful. It's just, it's great. Listen.
Reasonably.
I have loved you since the moment I clapped eyes on you. What could be more reasonable than to marry you?
We'd kill each other.
Nonsense.
Oh, neither of us can keep our temper.
I can, unless provoked.
We're both stupidly stubborn, especially you. We'd only quarrel.
I wouldn't.
You can't even propose without quarreling.
I swear I'll be a saint. I'll let you win every argument. I'll take care of you and your family. I'll give you every luxury you've ever been denied. You won't have to write unless you want to.
Wow. That was really intense.
So, as a writer, if somebody told me you won't have to write unless you want to, a part of me would be intrigued by that. I'd be like, oh yeah, that's what I want. I want to write when the whim takes me. I don't want to have to write for rent.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's the proposal of my dreams. Also, I love that, they're friends. That's the thing that is, when he says what could be more reasonable, it's like, exactly, why wouldn't you want to marry your best friend?
The author Louisa May Alcott was super irritated with everyone who was like, make Joe and Lori get married. And she was like, no, shan't. So she ultimately splits them up and pawns him off on one of the sisters.
Wonderful.
But yeah, he's just that wonderful character that's like, we're such good friends. We connect so much. I'm so into you. It would be so perfect if we were in a relationship. And Joe is just like, I'm not having it. I want an old German man who tells me my writing is terrible and has soup in his beard.
Which, same, Joe. That's all I want also as well. Ideally played by Gabriel Byrne. So yeah, all right, good.
No,
good work.
no, not same. Extremely not same. I'm not here for any like rehabilitation attempts at the relationship she ends up in.
Wow, you feel very strongly about this. I love that. I want to talk also a little bit about another great title that you had, which was Rye Best Friend, Everyone Else is Overlooked, but Not You.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about this category, please.
So I think like I'm always of two minds when it comes to like shipping intensely like fictional characters. And one of which is I'm a total sucker for like maximum intensity and angst, right? Like just, I've got so many feelings. Let's describe them for 1,000,000 pages and never do anything about it. And yet I also really like jokes and I laugh at myself a lot. Like I laugh at my own intensity. So I'm often also like, I love the character who periodically shows up and is just like, I am here to remind everyone that the protagonist's problems are kind of stupid. And I often end up falling in love with that person myself, like just that person. Because then they also have their own secret angst, right? Which is like, oh, I'm the clown. I'm always making jokes. But what happens when the laughter stops? And I'm just trash is what I'm trying to say.
No, it's good trash. It's good trash.
But I'm especially, and this one's a little bit unfair because I put down Mercutio from Romeo and Juliet because he gets to do both, right? He gets to like laugh at everybody for their romantic problems, but then he also gets a big dramatic death scene where he's like, well, don't all you feel terrible for not paying attention to me, and now I'm dead and it's all your fault. So he gets to like play both sides, and it's like fully influenced by the fact that I saw the movie version of Romeo and Juliet, the Baz Luhrmann version.
Yes,
obviously,
I
the
was
only
just
version.
about to say.
It's so good.
I saw a post on Tumblr literally yesterday where someone said Harold Perrineau is the best Mercutio there has ever been. And I was like, oh my God, yes. That great bit where he says, by my heel, I care not.
Yes.
And he kind of like, his lips are kind of like pursed, and you can tell he is relishing saying that line. He has like such light in his eyes. He was such a great actor to play that role. Ugh, I love that movie.
Both him and then John Leguizamo as, I think, Tybalt were
my gosh.
just like such a great combination of like, I'm wearing ridiculous clothes, I'm covered in glitter, I hate everything, but everything's a joke. Yes. And you're too distracted by the like, pale, long-haired, depressed, like white 17-year-olds who are dying for each other. And all the fun is over here. Like the real party is over here with John Leguizamo and Harold Perrineau.
Yes.
Mallory, I wanted to go back to your simultaneously devoted yet unavailable lesbians of all genders and talk a little bit about Shug Avery from The Color Purple.
Oh, man.
Talk to me about Shug Avery and why she resonated with you.
I should preface this, too, by saying, like, sometimes I say the word lesbian, and I mean almost anything. Like, I understand that Shug is canonically pretty bisexual. So I don't necessarily mean that I'm making, like, a definitive claim about someone's sexual identity so much as saying, like, this person is incredibly compelling and has the charisma levels of a tractor beam. But that sort of figure who is, like, somebody who, when you first meet them, they're incredibly confident. They don't necessarily like care a lot about you or like want to help you, but like they slowly are the person who opens you up. Right? It's again like that fantasy of somebody who is initially cold and indifferent to me, or not necessarily cold, but sort of like indifferent, will in fact become so won over by me that they will help me unlock like the character traits that I need in order to take care of myself. Like they want me to be the best version of myself. And by the end of it, not only will we have had like incredible life-altering sex, I will be a different, better kind of person because of them. You know?
My God, stop reading my diary, Mallory.
It's my diary too.
The Color Purple was one of those books that we passed around in junior high school, again around 12, 13 years of age, that we kind of whispered about because of the scene where Shug and Celie kiss, and then they have these little like nighttime visits, and all this kind of stuff is happening. I mean, it's a
Nighttime Visits is such a great. That's my next album.
And so we would pass it around, and I remember my life science teacher took the book from me because it was my book, and I was giving it to somebody to read. And of course, I'm 12, 13, and I had like turned to the actual page where Shug is basically like licking Celie's nipple or something like that. Yes, because she compared it to like a baby. That's how Celie compared the situation, because that's all she knew. It was like having kids and breastfeeding. I'm going to read a little bit of it because it's such a beautiful passage, and I think it's important to hear. She say, "I love you, Miss Celie." And then she haul off and kiss me on the mouth. She say, like she's surprised. I kiss her back, say, too. Us kiss and kiss till us can't hardly kiss no more. Then us touch each other. I don't know nothing about it, I say to Shug. I don't know much, she say. Then I feel something real soft and wet on my breast, feel like one of my little lost baby's mouth. Way after a while, I act like a little lost baby too.
Oh, my heart.
So I had pointed to that scene, and my teacher took the book from me, and he gave me this look like you know better. But Shug was one of those characters that really stood out to me because everyone around, it was like the world orbited around her. Mr. wanted her, Celie wanted her. She would come in with all these other people who like, say these terrible things about her and stuff like that. So she was always on somebody's mind, whether it was good or bad. And I was just like, this is so intriguing. What is it about this woman? And she had that charisma that you've talked about, Mallory, where people were just drawn to her. And I just remember thinking, how can I be like this woman? You know, she could sing, she dressed well. Maybe she had a little issue that she needs some, to be taken care of for when we first see her.
Yeah.
But once she got better, everyone just kind of loved her and surrounded her. So I feel you on this idea of being devoted, but also recognizing that this person is just somebody that you can never have.
Right. And that who's like capable of both tremendous personal cruelty, but also if they turn the focus of their like joy for living and confidence and enthusiasm and sensuality on you, your life will change. Like
That's
the first
it.
thing she says to Celia is like, you're ugly.
Yeah.
But later she's like, I'm going to shepherd you through this new journey of your life, and I'm going to turn you on to like the world itself. And so that combination of like, I could destroy you, I could recreate you. You don't necessarily know which one you're going to get from me, like the thrill of that unpredictability and that sense of danger. And then the joy when it's like, oh, she's turning on the like nurturing and the love and the attention. I'm getting that. That's like, whew.
Yeah. It's such a compelling narrative. This idea of you, like you said, you can destroy me or you can really make me something. And I don't necessarily want that in my real life, I've decided. I think with age, I'm kind of like, nah, I want to know where I stand.
Oh, yeah. No,
But-
I don't want to be like a pick-me person.
Right. But in literature, it's such a compelling like device to kind of mold your character. You're just kind of like, oh my gosh, who is this? Like, that's the thing. Like, you can't take your eyes off them. And even when they turn that back on you and they are looking at you with just kind of like, like you said, that deep cruelty that Shug does display, you kind of go, do you know what? Like in real life, I'd be like, nah, fuck this, bye, I'm out. But in the book, I'm kind of like,
yes.
more of it. I love it.
No, because in my real life, it's like, oh, I got to have boundaries and there's appropriate things you can and can't say to somebody. And if someone opened with, I think you're really ugly, we probably would not go on to know one
Right.
another
That's a
very
neg.
closely.
How dare you?
But in a book, oh man, yeah, give me the journey.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I like about romance novels, particularly those urban fantasy paranormal ones, is that the hero is always somebody who is scary, imposing, intimidating, but then he meets, the love of his life. And he's a little bit of an asshole, but then also he's just like putty in her hands. He's
Yeah.
a totally different person with
Yeah.
her. And it's like, yeah, he's an asshole to everybody else, but to me,
But to me, he's great.
right, he's just
so
a little
soft.
kitten,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of thing.
I was rereading one of my favorite Rick and Michonne fanfics recently. It's called Bad Things. It's by Kendra Writer 33, and everyone should read it. But there's a bit when they have Rick and Michonne. Rick is like this hardened, grizzled. It's the end of the world. There are fucking zombies everywhere, or rather walkers everywhere. It's not necessarily a world that's conducive to soft, gentle men. Like, you have to kind of just be hard just to live. And there's a scene where Michonne licks Rick.
I had no idea what you were about to say because that pause
I'm
after
sorry,
licks was
sorry.
real good.
Sorry, I got taken away on the pages of that fanfic. But she licks the skin at like where his thigh meets his pelvis, and she discovers that he's ticklish, and he kind of blushes and when I read that, I was so moved. I was like, oh my god, he's ticklish. He kills people with his big gun, but he's ticklish. And
More men blushing in fiction
Mate.
in 2018.
that's all I want. That's all. I'm going to write 700 books in 2018. And all of them are going to have blushing men who grow bashful when they are faced with the full gaze of their lover's love. That's all I want. That's what I love. But to go back to the Shug thing that you were saying about people who are withholding, people who are basically not straight shooters. They basically look at a situation and judge whether they're going to be cruel or whether they're going to be lovely. And the flip of that is a straight shooter, which I also really love reading about in fiction. People who do not hide how they feel. They say what they mean and they mean what they say. And I find that also to be just as wildly attractive. And one of the characters that I love so much, who is exactly this kind of straight arrow guy or person, is Magnus from the short story North Country from Roxane Gay's collection Difficult Women.
Yes.
Has everyone read this story?
Yes.
It's so good.
Magnus is, my God, I read that and
He's a logger, right?
he's a man. I dreamt about him when I read the story. Again, that thing that Mallory said about you can picture them and you can, you're given just enough information for you to go out and construct the person. And he is this guy, and the protagonist of the story is Kate, and she is difficult, as befits the name of the collection, difficult women. And she's someone who's a little bit cold, and she kind of dismisses him at first, and she keeps kind of saying how, listen, I don't want you. You're just here for a good time and blah, blah, blah. And he kind of he just keeps coming back, not because he's like a martyr or desperate for punishment. He just likes her and he turns up on his terms and gets consent and whatever. But he's such a straight shooter. And there's one bit in particular after she has, essentially, she's at home at Christmas and he overhears her on the phone saying, because he calls her at Christmas, and he overhears when her mother kind of goes, "Oh, who's that?" And she goes, "Oh, he's no one. Don't worry about it." And he's understandably very hurt.
Right.
And he says, and this is the bit that I love. I'm just going to read a little bit from North Country, and she says, "This is Roxane Gay writing. I send Magnus a card, and a letter, and gift, and another letter, and another letter." Offering apologies, admitting that we are very much a thing, admitting that I long for him. He sends me a text message that says, "I'm still angry." I send more letters. He writes back once, and I carry his letter with me everywhere. Now, I just want to say there is nothing in this whole story that is sexier than the point where he says, "I'm still angry."
Yes.
Just say it with your chest.
Just say what you mean.
Say what
Express
you
your
mean.
emotions. Just be out there.
And then afterwards they make up and it's all great and whatever. But the way he just says, "I'm still angry. I don't want you to think this is okay," because it's not okay. And that's the thing that kind of jars her out of kind of like, "Oh no, I want this."
Yeah.
And I love that. Magnus, if you are out there, mate, this is a podcast, but also it's now my official dating line. Magnus, come at me. Just call. Come through. Jeez.
I was just thinking too, and that's what's so great in fiction, because in fiction, it's always the character you want to express their emotions. That's the one that does it, right? Because sometimes in life, the person who is very upfront and honest about their feelings, it's great, but you don't feel the same way. So there's that sort of sense of, this is probably a nice quality for you, but it doesn't affect me. Whereas sometimes the person that you want more than anything to be direct is not direct. And so combining those two people into one, and it's like, it can't just be that somebody's direct. It has to be somebody that I want to be direct with me. Getting to see that play out is like...
I love when there are no words, just sounds. Okay, Mallory will be back with us right after the break. And please stay tuned, because they brought something that truly will tickle, drag, censure. It will, oh God, you're just going to get your whole life. So hold on. All right, do you want to start?
No, you start.
Cheers.
I got a
Gee,
little.
thanks, Nichole.
I got a little.
You got a little bit?
Sprinkle, yeah.
All right, okay, all right. Hey, Nichole, have you ever wondered how that perfect song ended up in that unforgettable TV moment?
As a matter of fact, I have been.
I know you have. So each week on Showstopper, Spotify's Xavier Jernigan spotlights a TV show or film and explores its unique sounds through interviews with the music supervisors, composers, and talent who create it. Yeah. So relive the most memorable musical moments with Showstopper, returning Monday, November 27th, exclusively on Spotify.
Mallory, as you know, each episode includes fanfic wars, which is where we read drabbles based on our thirst object of the episode of the day. But we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to ask you to do a reading for us. Can you let us know what you're going to read?
Yes. Yeah. So initially we had talked about doing something from text from Jane Eyre, but I feel like so much more in keeping with today's theme is this piece, What I've Learned About Female Heterosexual Desire from Decades of Reading.
Ugh, drag us.
So, Mallory, we're ready. Go for it.
I will. I'm going to start this first with a disclaimer that this is just like an exhaustive list of tropes that come up in a lot of things I have read over the years. I'm not trying to make any claims about what heterosexual women actually want all the time, so much as things that keep popping up again and again in stories. That's like, oh, there's a theme here.
Yes.
So here we go. Things I've learned about heterosexual female desire from decades of reading. Women only love men with crooked smiles. A man who smiles with his mouth all in a straight line might as well be dead. A male smile should resemble nothing on earth so much as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, Lombard Street, a lightning bolt, a scarecrow with a broken neck, or 2 palm trees leaning against each other to form a big X. Most women cannot distinguish between the feeling of love and what happens when a young man has floppy hair that falls over his eyes. Truly lovable men have eyes hidden so deeply behind a cascade of floppy chestnut hair they cannot even see you. Men are most attractive when they have at least one, but no more than 3 cosmetic flaws, like a scar on the chin, a slightly chipped tooth, poor, like Chip the Cup from the cartoon version of Beauty and the Beast. 100% of women want to have sex with someone who embodies the fox version of Robin Hood from the cartoon Robin Hood, but many do not actually want to have sex with a fox or a man dressed as one. It's not enough to have a lot of hair falling in your eyes. Men must be constantly tugging at their own hair in exasperation, or at the very least running their hands through it as they think very carefully about art or something. Men should have a ton of money, but not care about it for even a second. He should literally forget he even has any. He should be able to whisk you away on a gold helicopter. And then when you try to tip the pilot in cash, he says something like, "What are those weird little flat green dudes in your wallet?" Because he doesn't care about money at all, even though he has so much of it.
Oh my God.
Someone understood him once, but then she died.
Yes.
It's
I'm sorry.
It's really good when a man could hurt you and maybe spends a lot of time hurting other people, but makes an exception in his hurting people schedule for at least one woman he doesn't hurt, but he could if he wanted to, only he doesn't. So it would be great if he murdered everybody except for you and didn't murder you even a little bit. If he's normally so powerful that he could destroy you, but he's in the hospital or jail or something, or just tied up in a bunch of cabins in the woods maybe, and you have to bring him mush to bring back his strength, and he's totally dependent on you, and he hates it, and he reminds you of how much he hates it, but there's not anything he can do about it, and he has to rely on you, and maybe trust again for the first time in his whole entire life. That's good. Whenever possible, a man should have a cruel mouth, particularly if he has blue eyes. The bluer the eyes, the crueler the mouth. A man with cornflower blue eyes should have a mouth like a genocide.
Yes.
If he can't have a cruel mouth, he should have strong and calloused hands, sort of rough, but surprisingly gentle, like if it turned out his hands were actually made of doves. And he should be a little dim, but incredibly dedicated to you. Like he shouldn't be able to remember fractions, but every day he builds you a 4-poster sleigh bed out of oak and devotion.
That's my line.
It's good if a man is skittish and terrified of affection, like a beautiful horse that appears on the end of a frozen lake one day, and you have to tame it by bringing it a handful of food every morning until it slowly comes to learn your scent, but like with sex. Like a mean professor who always wears powder blue button-ups and has a little bit of chest hair that's not too dark and always withholds praise. His mother is just the worst and you're nothing like her. If a man is calm 100% of the time, like so calm that he's mostly dead, and he only gets boners for his job because he loves his job so much, and he's always sitting at a desk or standing with a phone doing his job, but then all of a sudden he can't stop getting boners for one specific woman, and he's mad at her for how much she's distracting him from his job, which has never happened before, because how he's literally never been attracted to even a single woman in the history of being alive in his own body until right now, and he's going to straight up murder you with sex because it turns out all that studiousness that he thought was his personality was actually the calm before the dick storm. Sometimes women instead love it when men are sweaty and sleazy like a sexual rat. I don't know. That's it, I guess.
Mallory, you have dragged us.
I have never felt more straight, more female, more romance novel reader. The thing is, I have read that piece at least 50 times, but there is something about having the author read it to you. And you just kind of go, yes, I feel dragged and cleansed.
Yes.
Well, and it's so funny because there's ways in which I feel also like targeted by it, but also apart from it, like as a very like classic old school bisexual, there's times when that trope in a male character, I'm like, oh, this guy, I'm over it. But throw it on a female character and all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, this is fascinating and new and good. And then there's times when it'll show up in a male character and I'll be like, oh, it's still working. This is very frustrating. So a lot of this is directly targeted at me and my own responses to characters when I'm like, you know better than this. And then my heart is like, no, I don't. I love it. I'm an idiot. Goodbye forever.
That's truly the sweet spots whenever you're reading. It's kind of like, drag me, but also I love this.
Mallory, that was incredible.
Oh God, I feel
We
so
love
good.
you.
I love you both enormously.
Where can our listeners find you on the internet?
Listeners can find me anywhere longing is found. They can find me on Twitter at Evil Mal Ellis, which is just evil and then MALLELIS. I also have a newsletter called The Shatner Chatner.
It's great.
Which is just shatnerchatner.com. And I guess they can find my book, which is coming out in March, The Merry Spinster. It is a collection of upsetting short stories, and they should read it if they want to, and not if they don't.
Nice.
Upsetting short stories. I like that.
Yeah.
I also give people advice with a very different. I don't tell people to do things like long forever or make bananas decisions. But I the current Dear Prudence over at Slate, and that's just at slate.com/Dear Prudence. I do a podcast, which you have been on.
Yeah.
And your episodes are fantastic. And then I also write the column every week.
Beautiful. Mallory, you are just a celestial, majestic being, and we appreciate you all the time, every day.
This was the high water mark of my life.
Wow.
Oh my God.
If you don't know what thirst sommelier is, well, you're about to learn something today. That's I love that. Thirst sommelier is basically where we essentially send you recommendations for who you should be fancying next. Nichole, are you ready?
I surely am.
This is one of my favorite thirst sommelier requests that we've had in many a minute. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
This voicemail truly is just, it's so sweet. It's so harking back to a simpler era when people just weren't as gym toned. But anyway, that's I'm not gonna give too
don't
much away.
spoil it yet. Don't
I'm not gonna
spoil
spoil it. This is the thirst sommelier request that we received this week.
Hey, Bim and Nichole, it's Ariana. First of all, I want to thank you for this truly noble service. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. My request is something that's been bothering me for a few years now. I'm someone who really preferred Chris Pratt before he got all swole. And, you know, he looks great. He can do whatever he wants with his body. More power to him. But for me, Parks and Rec Chris Pratt was like much more my speed. And I feel like because Hollywood is what it is, we are basically allowed like one big dude at a time. And I don't know who really has kind of stepped in to make up for this loss. And I miss it. You know, I miss a guy who's just like kind of doughier, like tall, a real presence, who, you know, can like make you feel safe, but also like, oh yeah, you know, like I think you guys get it. So if you could help me out, that would be amazing. I'd really appreciate you letting me know where I can direct this thirst that has been really frustrated for a while. You guys are the best, and I love you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
That was adorable.
I want to kiss that message. It's so sweet.
She really misses a little hefty Chris Pratt, a little thickums.
I love hefty. I love thickums. Andy, as played by Chris Pratt on Parks and Rec, was the ideal schlub. I had like a real soft spot for him. So I understand what Ariana's saying. I understand that she needs something to kind of, you know, plug the hole in her life. I get that. And so I gave this a little bit of thought, and I settled upon a man who I think really fits the bill. Ariana, have you heard about an actor by the name of David Harbour? Because you should. David Harbour, for those of you who don't know, is currently starring in Stranger Things on Netflix. He plays Hopper, the police chief who is in this town, and he's just trying to solve these mysteries and just trying to survive, man. And he has exactly what I would call that doughy, wonderful kind of dad bod that Ariana is so clearly missing now that Chris Pratt basically lives in the gym. David Harbour has a great face. He's kind of square-jawed, but big with it. So it's not quite a lantern jaw. It's kind of a lantern jaw that's a little bit soft, whilst also remaining a little bit hard. He's got a great face. He's got like an open, honest, working-class face. He also, as a person, like in his personal life, seems to have a huge sense of humor. Seems like, in a couple of scenes on Stranger Things, he does a little dance. He's a bit of a goofball. He has fantastic social media presence. He's very funny. He clearly loves Winona Ryder and often will post photos of him and Winona together at work, and we'll put like a little joke about how he's not worthy, which correct, no one is. I just love him so much. Like, I look at him and I feel warm. He's such a human, like, just a wonderful ball of dough who is also just incredibly sweet. And I fancy the pants off him. So I urge you to cast your attentions towards Mr. David Harbour. Nichole, who have you got for Ariana?
Okay, stick with me.
I'm sticking.
Busta Rhymes.
Yes. Wow. Yes.
Busta Rhymes, the rapper. Yes. He
I love how you clarify the rapper.
I mean, there might be somebody out there who's unfamiliar.
Mm-hmm.
Busta is 6'1".
Yes.
He's been around a good 20 or so years.
Easy.
Distinctive voice.
Yes.
Commanding presence, partly because of his height, partly because of his enthusiasm, his persona, his attitude, like all of that. Like, he comes in a room, that he's in the room. He's gotten, he's picked up some of that grown man weight.
Yes, he has. Woo! Yes, he has.
And when he was on Master of None, he was a really standout in Master of None. So he is like multi-talented. Don't count him out. Just, go back and look at the stuff that he's been in, because he has a few acting credits.
He does.
Just go back and check him out. Look at some of his videos,
Yeah, he has some range,
Yeah.
Like, he's not just a rapper. He's a multifaceted, multi-talented guy.
Yeah, so Busta Rhymes, David Harbour.
Two solid ones there.
Yeah, and I also like David Harbour because on Twitter he's very self-deprecating.
Yes.
He's very self-aware.
Yes.
He's, all of this. But
it's funny. And he wears the hell out of that police sheriff uniform. Everything's just kind of like, a little bit tight because he's got that great dad bod. I was like, yes. And then he posted this amazing selfie, like, a little back shot. And I was like, yes, David, show us your middle-aged ass. I love it. I love it. Okay, so if you liked what we just did for Ariana, who was looking for a new thirst object, remember that we very much can do this service also for you. So don't forget, please leave us a message if you require the services of the Thirst Sommeliers. You can call us on 765-884-4778. That's 7658-THIRST.
Thirst Aid Kit is produced by Julia Furlong, Eleanor Kagan, and Agarnesh Ashagre, with editing help from Meg Kramer.
Our music is by Tanya Morgan.
Follow the show on Twitter at Thirst Aid Kit. Find us on Tumblr at thirstaidkitpodcast.tumblr.com.
And you can find us on Twitter at Bimadu and TN Whiskey Woman. That's TN Whiskey with an E Woman. Also, you can do us a huge favor. You can go to Apple Podcasts and drop us a review. We love the reviews. The first important thing is they help other people find the podcast. And the second thing is we are narcissists and we love to read about how amazing we are. So if we're doing something you like, you should definitely let us know.
Like this listener, Tegs, Tegss, who said, I would rather stay in on a Friday night with these ladies than go out. Fabulous.
Oh, Tegs, mate, what a beautiful, beautiful review. I also found this amazing review from, I think I'm pronouncing this right, Melina Correa. First of all, great name. And they said, this podcast is dangerous. I listen to it on my commute and it is almost too much to handle. The hosts are incredible. Thank you. And I love all of their guests, which I thought was such a sweet, lovely thing. They also shouted out our Tumblr, which is great. And they basically called us their new favorite podcast. Now, listen. I don't know how ego works, but mine is so full right now.
I love praise.
That's beautiful. I am all carrot, no stick. Thank you so much. Remember, if you're tweeting about the show, please feel free to use the hashtag TACPod. That's TAKPod. We love your reactions.
Thanks so much for listening. Stay tuned and stay thirsty.
Bye.